She was a simple peasant girl, illiterate, barefoot, and cradled in the quiet of a French village. Yet she would stand before armies, command kings, and spark hope in a land besieged. At 19, Joan of Arc was burned alive, but in that blaze, she became something far larger than a martyr. She became France's soul reborn. Before we begin, drop your location and local time in the comments. It's extraordinary to know where this story is alive today. You find yourself in Domrémy, northeast France, around 1412. A tiny hamlet nestled between farms and woods, untouched by war's clangor, yet the 100 Years' War is already bleeding the land. Joan is a farmer's daughter, her name spoken by peasants, but her destiny whispered by saints. At 13, Joan begins hearing voices. Archangel Michael, Saint Catherine, and Saint Margaret speak to her, urging her to save her country. Terrified but resolute, she confides in her family and villagers. They dismiss her as fanciful, but a spark of strange certainty lights in her eyes. In 1429, France is fractured. London-installed governments rule the north. The Dauphin Charles VII belongs to a shadowed throne, his legitimacy in doubt. The English lay siege to Orléans, the last bastion blocking Charles's path to coronation. Joan, now 17, slashes her hair and dons men's clothing. She travels to Vaucouleurs demanding support. The commander, Robert de Baudricourt, laughs until Joan prevails. He secures an escort, and in February 1429 she journeys to Chinon to meet the Dauphin himself. Picture her before the court, ragged, determined, voice strong. She convinces Charles through vision and vulnerability that God has chosen her. The court, desperate, accepts. Joan, the lowliest of shepherd girls, becomes the standard-bearer of the army. In April she arrives at Orléans. You can almost feel the tension in the air, soldiers gaunt, morale shattered. Joan strides out with her banner, red lilies on white, a symbol of divine mission. She urges the troops forward. The lifting of the siege unfolds in 9 days. The English retreat. The impossible becomes truth. The victory echoes across the land. The Loire campaign follows. At Patay, Joan leads another charge, this time with crossbow bolts striking armor, horses clattering. The English rout completely, opening the road to Reims. In July 1429, Charles is crowned king, Joan beside him. For one shining moment, she stands at the center of a reborn France. But every triumph carries a shadow. Joan's fame, youthful, fearless, miraculous, terrifies the English and countless French nobles who see her as a threat. The story that saved France is beginning to unravel. In September 1429, she leads an assault on Paris. Wounded by a crossbow bolt, she retreats, her momentum faltering. The tide is turning. Hopes drain, whispers begin, visions are dangerous, prophets are charlatans. In May 1430, as Joan attempts to break the siege of Compiègne, she is captured by Burgundian forces allied with England. She is sold to the English, loaded into a dark cell in Rouen. The Maid of Orléans, once the kingdom's beacon, is defrocked and broken. Behind her prison walls, Joan is isolated. The voices that guided her now echo in anguish. The man she called king does nothing. Charles VII refuses to rescue her, unwilling to risk his throne. Joan waits. The trial begins in January 1431. She stands before a pro-English ecclesiastical court, led by Bishop Pierre Cauchon. They interrogate her on her visions, her cross-dressing, her divine authority. Each question is a trap, each reply a defiance. When asked to recant, she does, but only to buy time. Days later, she returns to her bold conviction. In men's clothes once more, she declares she cannot deny God's will. The court convicts her of relapsed heresy. The verdict is death. On May 30, 1431, Joan of Arc, 19 years old, is led to the stake in Rouen's old marketplace. Bound to a post, flames rising, she holds a crucifix high. In that final moment, her voice rings clear, prayers for France, for her saints, for a future she could not live to see. She dies a martyr, and yet in her death, she was more alive than ever, an eternal flame in the heart of a nation. The fire was meant to extinguish her, but it did the opposite. As Joan's voice faltered, crushed by smoke, her spirit soared. The crowd watched, stunned, some in horror, others in hushed reverence, as the Maid of Orléans became a furnace of folklore. Her death in Rouen didn't end her story, it ignited a legend. Word of Joan's execution swept across Europe. France recoiled. Within days, petitions for martyrdom multiplied. French soldiers began carving effigies of her into their armor. Banners bearing her image fluttered in the wind, and peasants whispered prayers to the Virgin Martyr. Even some English soldiers confessed their unease. She had become too alive to be silenced. King Charles VII, who owed his crown to Joan, avoided her legacy. He never paid her ransom, never disrupted the trial. His silence became complicity. It took more than 2 decades and a change in power for her case to be reopened. In 1456, under King Charles VII's reign and powerful influence, the Church convened a retrial in Rouen. 13 of the original judges recounted. The verdict was overturned. Joan was officially cleared of heresy, her name restored, her reputation redeemed, but repentance came too late to save her life. She remained ash in the River Seine, buried anonymously, yet her spirit refused anonymity. Over centuries, she was canonized as a saint in 1920, and her image became immortal, a banner in wartime, a symbol of French resistance, a beacon for the oppressed. You see her everywhere now, in stained glass windows, paintings, statues. She stands at the foot of cathedrals, atop pedestals, and in the hearts of those who see her sacrifice as universal. Politicians invoke her, soldiers salute her, children memorize her story. She is the proto-heroine, the girl who defied armies and kings, the peasant who became a warrior, the martyr who never bowed. Beyond myth, she reshaped the world. Her victories at Orléans and Patay turned the tide of the 100 Years' War. Her courage gave Charles VII the legitimacy to be crowned at Reims, changing the course of French history. Without her, some historians argue, France might not have survived as an independent realm, and yet what lingers most is her defiance. She stood barefoot, in men's clothing, before the cruelest of courts, and remained unbroken. While flames devoured her flesh, she fed a nation's flame of hope. Imagine yourself today in Rouen. You stroll through cobbled streets to the square where the pyre once roared. A simple cross marks the ashes. People drop flowers, say silent prayers. History meets memory there. The girl who spoke to saints, led armies, and flamed into martyrdom still walks among us in spirit, in story, in stone. Joan's life was short, but her impact was eternal. She taught the world that even the humblest can command armies, that faith can shake monarchies, and that death can be the seed of legend. She was only 19, but she became immortal. They killed her for beliefs and identities she embodied. Then they resurrected her memory to serve their own purposes. After Joan's execution in 1431, France began to shift. The flames intended to bury her instead, pressed her into legend. Soldiers carved her image onto their armor, citizens whispered prayers at her stake site, and playwrights in Orléans dramatized her miracles. Within 3 years, a powerful question hung over the kingdom. How could a girl who gave France its king be branded a heretic?